Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Rider Ramblings. It's a lovely day, and I'm on the way to the office. Jamie has asked me to talk about the new rules in France for lane splitting and filtering. So I've done a bit of research and read up what I can find about it, which includes information from the Transport Ministry and the actual law itself, which was of course in French, but I'll give it to you in English, and we'll go through what's what. So first of all, let's start with a bit of history. The law in France is that basically lane splitting and filtering is illegal, and that's always been the law for the whole of France, whether that's metropolitan France, i.e. the bit in Europe, or the dominions, which are all the territories outside of Europe. But the big cities, everybody was filtering and lane splitting, and it was tolerated by the police and the gendarmes and so on, simply because it actually kept the traffic flowing. But every so often they would have clampdowns in particular areas and pull you over and fine you €135 for lane splitting and filtering. And then about 5 years ago they decided to run a test in certain cities in France. I think it was 5, but I can't remember the exact number. And this test was to see whether or not lane splitting should be made legal or whatever. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, the law creating the test wasn't very clear as to what the test was supposed to actually monitor, and when the test finished, which was about where are we? The beginning of this year. Yes, I think it was the 1st of February this year when the test finished. They decided that it hadn't been a good test because it hadn't been properly specified. So they would run another test, but we had to wait for them to create the law to run the test. And so consequently, in August, they passed the law to create the new test system for lane splitting and filtering. And this time they've actually defined it more precisely. Not only have they defined it more precisely, they've actually extended it to a number of different regions, as well as one city. So I believe it's now 9 regions where lane splitting and filtering will be legal for 3 years while it's tested. So the regions are basically the ones where the big cities are in France. I'll put a a list in the comments section below, so you'll be able to see which ones they are. So the 9 regions, and I believe the city of Lille. So the parameters for the test, as I say, are for these areas. The test parameters are that lane splitting is allowed on a multi-lane road like this, where there's more than one lane in the same direction, and you're allowed to do it between the outside lane and the next lane, whether that's in this case the inside lane or whether it would be one of the middle lanes on a 3 or 4 lane road. And they've set some speed limits as well. The traffic in any lane, the outside lane or the middle lane, must not be travelling at more than 50 kilometres an hour. If it's travelling at 50 kilometres an hour or over, then the motorbikes, or the motos as we call them, because it's scooters and the 3-wheeler things, all must return to their lane, whether that's the centre lane or not. When they're lane splitting, they shouldn't travel at more than 30 kilometres, a maximum of 30 kilometres an hour, faster than the traffic. Up to, as I say, up to a maximum of 50 kilometres an hour in total. Right, which is a bit confusing, but basically, if you're lane splitting or filtering or whatever, you can do so up to a speed differential of 30 kilometres an hour to the traffic and no faster than 50 kilometres an hour. So that's the basics. Now, you're not allowed to overtake another moto that's actually lane splitting or filtering. You're not allowed, and that's part 1, so you're not allowed to overtake another. Excuse me a minute while I watch what this C4 is doing, because I don't think he or she knows what they're doing at all. It's better. Right, so you're not allowed to overtake another moto that's actually currently filtering or lane splitting. You're not allowed to push your way through the traffic, so you can't force traffic to move to one side for you. So, and there has to be sufficient room for you to actually lane split. So if there isn't sufficient room, you can't sort of push your way through clattering mirrors and things like this. So those are the basics. Now the experiment, as they're calling it, the test, is designed to last 3 years, and they're going to then evaluate after the 3-year period. Now, they've designed some new signs for the areas where lane splitting and filtering is allowed. I haven't seen any of the signs live yet, I've just seen the pictures of them, and it's to remind motorists that lane splitting is legal, and it's also to remind the motos that they're not supposed to go more than 50 kilometres an hour maximum when splitting. And just as an aside, quite a lot of people now seem to be lane splitting at 50 kilometers an hour, I've noticed, whereas previously they used to lane split somewhat faster than this. A lot of people have slowed it down to about 50 kilometers an hour, so that they are actually obeying the rules on that. So that's that. So I'm waiting to see one of these signs, but I haven't seen it yet. If I do, I shall point it out to you. I've got some pictures of them from the official documents, the laws, so I'll scan those in or whatever, and I'll show them up in the left or the right corner of the video for you to have a look at. So those are the rules. Now, as I say, below I'll put a list of the areas, the departments, the counties that you're allowed to lane split in. Some of them are areas like Ile-de-France, so all the departments, all the counties within Ile-de-France, lane splitting is allowed. But in others it's just a specific department, county, and in one case it's just a specific city, Lille. But I'll put all of that, I'll put the list below. I'll also put a link to some of the government documents I've found, so you know what's what and why, what you're allowed to do, etc. So yes. Yeah. I'll do all of that for you. Probably, if you're not sure if you're allowed to lane split or not, the best thing to do is, if you're in France, watch the locals. If the locals are lane splitting and filtering, then you're allowed to lane split and filter. If they're not lane splitting and filtering, then you're probably not allowed to filter. But that is a very, very general rule of thumb, because you will find people lane splitting and filtering when it's not allowed, I've noticed. Anyhow, that's the rule as it stands, or the law as it stands. Oh yes, there's one other thing I forgot to mention, is that if there is an accident while you're lane splitting or filtering, it must be reported to the police or the gendarmes, so that it can be logged as part of the experiment. So yes, they require that any accident that happens while lane splitting or filtering is reported to the police. Yeah, so that's that. Anyhow, I'll say thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it helpful. Any comments, suggestions, information that you might have, please put in the comments section below. I'd be very interested to read what you have to say, especially if you've got more knowledge about this than I have. As I say, I've just read the rules or the law that came from the French Parliament, and I've also read some supporting documentation as well, which you could say is explanatory information about it. Right, so thank you very much, and we'll speak to you next time.